Good to go? Good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing today? Awesome, good to hear. Today we are here to learn about healthy living for your brain and body. I'm Paul Erickson, but before I get started, I'd like to bring up Melissa Shirtcliffe. She's the director of the Walk to End Alzheimer's, Boston, Cambridge, and she'd like to say a few words about the walk that's coming up in October. Melissa?
Thank you, Paul.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'll be very brief. So I'm Melissa Shirtcliffe. I'm with the Alzheimer's Association, and one of our largest fundraising and public awareness events that we do to help promote, to help provide support and care services, research, is our Walk to End Alzheimer's, which is coming up in October 27th. So a little over a month away. The walk happens over at North Point Park in Cambridge, which is right across from the Museum of Science. We'd love for everybody to join us if you're interested in coming out that day, supporting the cause. It's a wonderful day for the community to come together, support the cause, raise awareness. If you're interested in raising funds, you certainly can do that too. It's not a requirement to participate, so we'd love for everybody to come out that day. We have a 1-mile route and a 3-mile route, so it's definitely accessible for everybody to be able to participate. We have some information that we can have in the back at the end if you're interested in joining us, but hope that you will consider joining us that day, and hopefully it will be beautiful weather. But thank you all so much for being here and for supporting the cause, and I will turn it back over to Paul. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. Again, my name is Paul Erickson. I'm a volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association. First of all, can everyone hear me okay? In the back, can you hear me? Okay, great. Today, we're going to be presenting on a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It's called healthy living for the brain and for the body. Just a little bit about me. I've been doing this for about 6 months, and my interest in this area really stems from my family history. My mother had Alzheimer's, and her father had Alzheimer's. So from a family history perspective, I'm in a high-risk group. And I've been doing a lot of the things we're going to talk about today for about 10 years. In order to reduce my risk. Independent of the Alzheimer's Association, for 10 years, I've been researching what I can do to reduce risk, incorporating these things into my life. And they're things that what I can tell you is right now I feel much better, period, than I did 10 years ago. Okay, so this is just a really great way to live. But more importantly, it's a great way that we can reduce risk of injury to our brains, and specifically dementia, Alzheimer's and other dementias. And so we're going to be focusing today on science-based solutions. There's research behind all of these, on practical things that everyday people can do to protect our brains and reduce our risk of Alzheimer's. Okay?
Don't drop your voice.
Excuse me?
I said don't drop your voice at the end of what you're saying.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and if anyone has difficulty hearing me, please just raise your hand and I'll slow down or speak up, or both. So today, we're going to learn a couple of things. We're going to talk about how certain behaviors that we can incorporate into our lives really affect our brains and our entire bodies, our entire health. And we're going to look at strategies in 7 different areas that we can focus on to incorporate good brain health. And those 7 areas are sleep, smoking, our mental health, so managing our stress and anxiety, physical activity, our exercise, nutrition, how we choose to feed our bodies, cognitive engagement, kind of a way that we exercise our brains, and then social engagement, how we interact with others. These are all things these are all areas that by incorporating certain activities in our lives, we can kind of strengthen our brains and build what we would call cognitive resilience to help protect them against things like Alzheimer's and other dementias. Let's start by talking a little bit about the brain. The brain is the control center behind our body. And often when we think of our brain, we think of thinking. And our brain certainly does that, but it does so much more. Our brain is what's decoding these sound waves when I speak and they hit your ears. Our brain helps us smell the flowers in the morning or hear the bees buzzing. Our brain helps our body move. It controls everything. And it's this amazing little thing that we have in our head. It's about the size of a grapefruit, and it has about 100 billion brain cells in it called neurons, 100 billion with a B. Okay? And these neurons are connected through little pathways. They're branches, like the branches of a tree in our brain, that are called neural pathways. And these neural pathways are what enable us to think and feel and move, and what enables our brain to function. So it's these signals traveling on these pathways in between these neurons. Certain diseases impact our brain cells, and they kill our brain cells. Alzheimer's disease is one of those diseases. And so again, we're going to talk about how we can build resilience and protection into our brains. Something that we'll be talking about frequently today is a connection between our heart and our brain. Okay, the heart-brain connection. So this little grapefruit thing weighs about 300 pounds. Our brain weighs about 3 pounds. Okay, not 300. About 3 pounds. It acts like it weighs 300 pounds, though, in terms of what it does. Because this little 3 pound brain, it's about 2% of my body weight, but it soaks up between 20 and 25% of the blood every time my heart pumps. So it's got a very, very rich vascular network in there. So it's consuming a lot of blood. So things that are good for our heart are ultimately going to be very good for our brains. And you're going to hear this theme throughout as we talk today. If it's good for our heart, it's good for our brain. Exactly. So we need blood flow. That blood flow brings oxygen and other nutrients to our brain, and it's helping to feed it. So we're going to be talking about the heart-brain connection a lot throughout this. So let's start with a little quiz here. Alzheimer's disease is a normal part of aging. Anyone who thinks Alzheimer's disease is a normal part of aging, please raise your hand. Okay, couple. Anyone who thinks it is not a normal part of aging, please raise your hand. I didn't see any hands on either answer. You got to answer one or the other. Come on. Okay, so to those who are B, that's Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. Okay, Alzheimer's it's a progressive neurological disease that that tends to kill brain cells and degrade our brains. However, it's not a normal part of aging. Age is the largest risk factor for Alzheimer's. Okay, it's the single largest risk factor. Once you hit 65 years old, your risk of Alzheimer's doubles roughly every 5 years. And by the time we're 85, about 1 in 3 people will have Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia. But it is not a normal part of the aging process by any stretch. So let's talk a little bit about Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Dementia is an umbrella term, and Alzheimer's disease is a piece of dementia. So as we age, there are certain things that we forget where we left our keys, we forget someone's name, we can't place something. That's a normal part of aging. Okay, that's called cognitive decline, and that's okay. What dementia is really when these issues start impacting our ability to function in the world in our everyday lives. That's really what dementia is, and dementia is going to be typically caused by something. Alzheimer's disease is the biggest type of dementia, so it is one of the types of dementia. There's also vascular dementia, there's dementia with Lewy bodies, there's Huntington's, there are other types of dementia, but Alzheimer's is the largest. Currently, throughout the world, about 55 million people suffer from Alzheimer's and other dementias. Okay? So currently, there is not a cure for Alzheimer's. However, there are things that we can do to reduce our risk of getting Alzheimer's, and there are things that we can do to delay the onset of Alzheimer's. There was an interesting report that came out. Norma had mentioned this when we did this last. There's a publication called The Lancet, It's a medical publication. And in August, they published their 2024 report on dementia, and they listed a number of risk factors that we can, what are called modifiable risk factors, things that we can control. By incorporating these in, they believe that almost 50%, they said 45% of Alzheimer's and other dementia cases can be either delayed or diminished through incorporating modifiable risk factors like we're going to talk about today. So these are really important to incorporate in our lives. All right? So when we think about our overall health, there are a couple of different factors that are going to factor into it. So, the first are our genes and our family history. So our genes we inherit from our family. As I shared, I inherited, my mother had Alzheimer's and her father had Alzheimer's. So my family history has Alzheimer's in it. There's nothing I can do about that. That's life. It is what it is. Some families live typically well into their 90s. Some, live shorter lives. So that's typically genetic and family history related. Other things like the environment can also impact our brain health. So are we in dirty areas, for example? Are we subjected to a lot of pollution? And we may be able to control that at work or not, or where we live. Here in Wellesley, for the people who live in this area, this is a beautiful area. It's clean. It's a fabulous place to kind of have a nice, clean, healthy brain. But the last thing, and the thing that we're really going to be focusing on today, are lifestyle choices. And these are choices that we make in things we do every day that can, again, kind of think of it as building strength in your brain. Almost like you have a personal trainer for your body to work out. These are things that we can do to help our brain work out, help our brain be strong, help our brain be resilient. So there's a term called cognitive resilience. So things that we're going to talk about today are things that help us build cognitive resilience. So in case, for example, I've got Alzheimer's in my family, if I'm to get Alzheimer's, maybe I can delay it by 5 or 10 years. Or maybe it won't happen, I can stop it from happening at all. So we're going to focus on these lifestyle choices, again, things that we call modifiable risk factors. So we want to think about, at the base of all this is our fundamental health. And there are 4 areas that are of particular importance for brain health that we want to focus on, and we want to have a good sense of where we're at, where our numbers are at with these. And those 4 are blood pressure, our blood sugar, so our glucose or A1C levels, our weight, or BMI, and our cholesterol numbers. Okay. So, what the science tells us and what the research tells us is that a lot of the factors that increase the risk of heart disease also increase risk of cognitive decline and dementia. And so hypertension, for example, high blood pressure is one of them. So high blood pressure, if you've got high blood pressure in midlife, that's going to increase risk of dementias later in life. The same is true for diabetes. Diabetes in midlife increases risk, as does midlife obesity. Okay? On the cholesterol side, we will obviously want to manage our cholesterol because, again, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. Exactly. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. So good cholesterol, HDL, it's good for your heart, and that's good for your brain. And we want to keep an eye on, the LDL and triglycerides, the other cholesterol. So we want to. The important takeaway is we want to understand what our numbers are, what our numbers should be, and work with our healthcare providers to help make sure that those stay in line in these areas. Okay? All right, question number 2, and everyone needs to raise their hand for one of the 2 answers. I'm watching you guys. It's never too early or too late to incorporate healthy habits. Who thinks that's true? And who thinks it's false? All right. Did I get everybody? Okay. That's correct. It's false. People of all ages, it's true. Thank you. It's true. people of all ages can benefit from adding more healthy behaviors. And one of the interesting things is we often think about thinking of these things later in life. These can be incorporated by people in their 30s and 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever age and beyond. Okay, so whatever age, we can incorporate these into our lives, and they're going to help us. So the 7 areas we're going to look at today are, number 1, getting quality sleep. Secondly, smoking and being smoke-free. Thirdly, taking care of ourselves, our mental health. We're going to look at exercising, how we can get moving and how that impacts us. How we eat, so what we feed our body, and that ultimately feeds our brains. How we can challenge ourselves, so we want to keep that brain active, keep it exercising. And then social connections, how we stay connected with one another. So let's start with getting quality sleep. Can I just have a raise of hands? How many people here feel that they sleep well, and when they get up, they're fairly refreshed? Okay, so about a quarter, maybe. Some. How many feel like you really don't sleep well at all? A handful. Okay, thank you. All right. So we want to work on habits that can really help us get good quality sleep. We want to get both quantity, length, but also good quality sleep, so we're not interrupted and hopefully we're sleeping through long periods. This is regenerative for our health, and it also helps reduce other risk areas that we talked about earlier, like hypertension, for example, and diabetes. So sleep is really, really important. Some people have issues with things like insomnia or sleep apnea. If that's the case, we would encourage you to work with your healthcare provider on ways that can address these, because it's important, again, that we're able to get both a good quantity of sleep and a good quality of sleep. So when we think about this, what we want to shoot for no less than 6 hours of sleep a night. Okay, and ideally we'd get more than that, but no less than 6 hours of sleep a night. There may be interruptions to our sleep, of course, but that's what our goal is. And so we want to think about the things that are really going to help us with our, help us get a good night's sleep. So what type of environment helps you sleep well? Some people like a warmer environment, some like a cooler environment. Some like a very dark environment, some like a little bit of light. Some people like some sort of white noise or soft noise that helps them sleep. Some people like complete silence. I like complete darkness and silence, for example. Can we create changes? There's a term called sleep hygiene. Can we create changes that give us better sleep hygiene and ultimately result in a better night's sleep for us? And are there ways, if we're being disrupted in the night, are there ways that we can minimize these disruptions? So let's talk about a couple of tips and ways we can do this. From an environmental standpoint, what we want to do is, control the room so it's providing the environment that's most conducive to us personally for our sleep. So if that's darkness, for example, my wife got blackout shades for us about a year ago. They're fabulous. Our room is pitch black at night, and it's great because our room faces the street. There's street lights out there. It makes all the difference. So if you like a dark room, for example, you could look at getting blackout shades. Or if you like a soft noise, maybe running a fan or a white noise machine. So thinking about controlling the room. Turning off screens before bedtime. Is anyone here guilty of looking at their phone up until the time they go to bed, or it's a tablet or a TV or something? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be tisking people. But what we want to do is get the blue light. We want to give our brains time to kind of tone down and get ready for sleep. My son shared, my wise 23-year-old sage of a son shared something with me that's really helpful. It's called 10-3-2-1-0. 10 hours before we go to sleep, no caffeine. Caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours, so it takes a lot of time to go through our system. So 10 hours before sleep, no caffeine. 3 hours before sleep, no food or alcohol. 2 hours before sleep, no work. And 1 hour before sleep, no screens. Okay? You can look that up online. It's There's 10, 3, 2, 1. And then there's a 0 at the end of that, which is if you set an alarm, 0 snoozes. When your alarm goes off, get up. So that's, incorporating structure like that into your day can also help with sleep. Yes, Tom?
What about water?
So you can drink water, and I know it can be problematic because you may have to get up and use the restroom in the middle of the night, but water was not included in that. Yeah. And it's also obviously important that we stay hydrated at night because we tend to get dehydrated. And I know it's a good thing to drink a big glass of water first thing in the morning because of dehydration. Yeah. Okay. And again, if you're experiencing sleep issues, particularly with things like insomnia or sleep apnea, speak with your healthcare provider about that because it's important that we address these and get good quality and quantity of sleep. Okay. Smoking. Smoking actually has a direct impact on our brains. We often think of smoking, I think of it and I think of lung, I think of heart, because that's what you hear about. But as we know, what's good or bad for the heart is good or bad for the brain. So, studies have shown that smoking increases the risk of cognitive decline and may also increase risk of dementias, including Alzheimer's. So the benefits of quitting smoking are self-explanatory. We probably all know those right now. They include lower risk of lung cancer, lower risk of heart disease, and you can add lower risk of cognitive decline on with that. The good news is that quitting smoking can bring someone's cognitive risk back down to the level of a non-smoker. So it's not permanent damage. You can, by quitting, there's hope. There's a big step for improvement. So if anyone smokes, or if you know someone who you care about who smokes, it's important to know that this has impact on our cognitive well-being as well. So, if you currently smoke, or again, if you know someone who you care about who smokes, the question is, how can we become smoke-free? What resources are available online to do this? And we all know that quitting smoking is very, very difficult. Once people start, it's tough. It's addicting. So, success is most often found through finding support, whether that's support through quit lines or a smoking cessation program. Your doctor or healthcare professional can also help in this area. It's not easy, but there are resources out there. So again, if you smoke or know someone who does, I would encourage them to use these resources. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is our mental health, and this is really taking care of ourselves. It's important that we take time for ourselves and we prioritize, self-care. We often have a lot on our plates. We may have other people that we're helping care for, whether they're friends or other family members, whether they're grandchildren or neighbors. We often have a lot on our plates. And these things can cause stress, they can cause anxiety, but self-care is very, very important because these stress and anxiety, these impact brain health as well. Okay? So when we think about mental health, again, it's important that we think about taking time for ourselves and recognizing that self-care is not selfish. My wife, who will be referenced frequently through this little presentation, she has a great expression that I think is very appropriate here. When we're on an airplane and they're talking to you about the oxygen masks coming down, they always say, put on your oxygen mask first, take care of yourself, and then help your child or other family members. Life is no different than that. We have to, if we're helping others, and particularly if we're stretched really thin helping others, it's important that we take care of ourselves so that we can continue to do that, and also so that we can protect our brains. So we want to think about what are some things that we can incorporate, and what do we enjoy doing, and how can we build breaks and incorporate these into our days, and how can we focus on self-care. So we can do, things that we enjoy, things that are relaxing. I saw a few people out there doing a jigsaw puzzle. That seemed relaxing. That's great self-care. Probably coming down here to this center, maybe shooting pool. I hear there's a great pool table here. Very nice. Things like that. Taking a nap, going for a walk with a friend. And there are plenty of great places to walk here in Wellesley. There's Centennial Park, there's the Brook Path, there's a ton of great places to walk. Dancing, reading a book, listening to a funny podcast, doing anything that we enjoy. But the important thing is carving time out for ourselves so that we can relax and enjoy ourselves. Would anyone like to share anything that they do to kind of carve time out for themselves, to care for themselves?
Reading a book.
Reading a book is great, absolutely. Anyone else? Yeah. Go for a photo walk, that's fabulous. And what a beautiful place to do it. Yeah.
This is a little bit like doing the opposite, and it's actually taking care of my dog. I'm going to get great pleasure out of it.
Well, you know what? It's so funny you mentioned that. That's a great example, Tom. It really is. I have a dog for the first time in my life right now, and she gets me out all the time. I take her to Centennial Park here. It is just me and Bella time. It's very relaxing for both of us, I think. So that's a great example. And you get exercise in there too, which is fabulous. Yeah, these are all great examples. So again, the important thing is that we recognize these and we incorporate them into our day and recognize the importance of caring for ourselves so that we're healthy. Healthy mentally and cognitive health. Does that mean I have to speed it up? The next thing we're going to talk about is probably the single most important on here, and that's getting moving. Physical activity, okay? Physical activity is going to get, particularly physical activity that's vigorous enough to get our hearts pumping, maybe breathing a little bit heavy. It's going to get blood pumping through our bodies. It's going to be feeding our brains, okay? Research has shown if there's one area that you can start to work on that has the biggest impact, it's likely exercise. And of course, this depends on where your baseline is. But the evidence shows that virtually no matter how much exercise you do now, incorporating additional exercise into your life is something that will likely provide cognitive resilience and reduce risk of Alzheimer's and other dementias. Now, it can be a little bit overwhelming to kind of think about how do we get started, how do we actually incorporate this into my life, especially if we're not doing a lot of exercise at the moment. And so, we can think about things that we might want to try. Are there new activities that you've wanted to learn and wanted to try? Trying to incorporate one of those. Are there friends you can ask to join you, whether it's on a walk or something else? So, in terms of tips, what we can do to actually incorporate this into our lives. The first, let's find things that already might be a part of our day. So, if you live in this area, there's a good chance you might have a nice place that you can walk around your neighborhood, and you can take a walk with a friend, which would make it even better. So are there things that you can do? You can perhaps take stairs rather than an escalator. If you're down at the Natick Mall and you want to go up to the second floor, try the stairs rather than an escalator. So that's kind of free exercise right there. Tom had mentioned walking the dog. Walking the dog is great exercise. If you don't have a dog, do you have a neighbor who's got a dog who needs a dog walker? I'm not kidding. You'd be doing your neighbor a favor, and you'd be getting yourself out a couple times walking that dog. So, does anyone play pickleball here? Norma. So, things like pickleball, or just getting out, or dancing. So the key here is starting small, doing something that you enjoy so it's not work. It's something you look forward to. You know, if you can, do it with someone who you enjoy being with. So you keep each other honest, you keep each other doing it, and you also have a nice time doing it together and get to talk together. Okay? So, you know, keep it fun, but let's start incorporating it into our lives. Again, this is probably the single most important one. Yes?
I find that I like to work out, and a lot of the working out, I can also read while I work out. Like on the stationary bike,
Ah.
I walk the treadmill, and you forget that you're working out sometimes, once you get into the habit.
Yeah, that's fabulous. All right, anyone else like to share anything that they do to stay active? Yeah. Swimming is a great way to stay active, a great form of exercise, and being in the water is also super soothing.
I'm not saying it, but I'm not sweating in the water, obviously.
Yeah.
I have to go really fast.
Yeah. Anyone else? I walk my dog at Centennial Park, like Tom, and which is a great thing to do. And I also hike with some friends. I got a friend a couple weeks ago, and we went and did a sunrise hike at Blue Hills. He picked me up at 5 in the morning. We drove down to Blue Hills and hiked up to the top where we could see the skyline in Boston, and we watched the sunrise. You may not want to go to Blue Hills, but you can go to Centennial Park here and get a beautiful view at Centennial and watch the sunrise. So, the beauty of being here in Wellesley is that there are a lot of resources to be out and to be active. It really is a wonderful place for that. Whether you want to go hit a tennis ball up against the wall, you've got, right down by Reedy Field, you've got all those courts down there. You've got great trails here. It's really a wonderful place to be able to get out. Okay, next up is eating healthy. So the way we feed our body, that nutrition is also going to feed our brain. Okay? And as we mentioned once or twice earlier, what's good for our heart is good for our brain. Exactly. So things that are good for our heart are going to be good for our brain, and that holds true with how we nourish ourselves as well. Nutritious food is good fuel for our brains. So we want to eat a balanced diet. And a balanced diet it's got more benefits than just brain health. It can reduce risk of heart disease, risk of cancer, risk of Parkinson's and other things, and obviously diabetes. So there are, a couple of different types of diets that are good for our brains. The two we're going to talk about today are what are called the DASH diet, which is a hypertension-based diet, and the Mediterranean diet, which is a diet most people have probably heard of. It's a diet that's really based on foods that tend to be consumed around the Mediterranean. I've been following for about 10 years something called the MIND diet, M-I-N-D, which is a combination of these two. It was developed at Rush Medical Center in Chicago. But they all kind of have the same fundamental idea behind them. And these ideas tend to be, we consume a lot of fruits and vegetables. And in the vegetable side, particularly berries that have antioxidants in them, like blueberries, for example. A lot of antioxidants, and they're actually pretty low in sugar. We want to eat things like nuts, beans, and whole grains. And these are good. They're heart healthy. They've got a lot of fiber in them. They're also what are called prebiotics, so they help the probiotics in our gut thrive. So things like that. On the meat side, we want to eat lean meats, poultry, and fish. And so they tend to be heavier on the fish and lower on the meats, and certainly lower on the red meats because they have saturated fats in them. And we want to look at healthier fats, like you get from olive oil or avocado oil or avocados, and you get from a lot of nuts. And we want to limit heavily processed and ultra-processed foods for sure. And also limit sugar and limit salt. Okay, there are a couple of things that I think about. Before I started my, anti-Alzheimer's regimen, I used to eat, a meal was not a meal unless it had a big piece of meat in it and maybe there was something else on my plate. That's how I ate. And there are kind of two quotes or visuals that I keep in mind now when I create a plate. There's an author named Michael Pollan, who's a nutritionist author. He wrote Omnivore's Dilemma, and he has an expression, eat food, not too much, mostly vegetables. And so when he says eat food, he's talking about eating real food, not processed. Not too much. We don't need to pile our plate up like we're at the all-you-can-eat buffet. And mostly vegetables, so we want to keep it green. And the other visual I have is, when I make a plate of food, try and treat the animal protein, whether it's red meat or chicken or whatever, almost as a condiment, and the main meal should be vegetable. So it's a big plate of beans and vegetables, and then a little bit of animal fat. Yeah. That's a great question. Do you know the answer to that, Norma?
I think it's basically the same thing. The vegetables that are frozen are taken at optimum fast, and so they're frozen, so you do have that nutrition there.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned something last week, Paul, regarding the steaming of vegetables. You do
Yeah.
a lot. You do lose nutritional value in vegetables. It's still good to eat vegetables, fresh vegetables, but I think the best bet would be a frozen vegetable or fruit as they are frozen at their optimal nutrition.
Yeah, that's a great question. But the overriding most important thing is we really want to get them into our body. And we can have, when you drive up and down Route 9, you can see how challenging it can be to eat healthy food. And Route 9 is representative of our country, okay? So we just need to be mindful about what we put on our plate, think about it. One other thing I would mention that's not in here, but it just kind of popped up in our life. My 23-year-old wise sage son works for a consulting firm in New York. He works long hours and he eats out a lot because he's working till 9, 10 at night and they pay for his dinner. His triglycerides, he just went to the doctor about 3 weeks ago, and his triglycerides were 2.5 times over the maximum. Okay? Yeah, not good. And I think a lot of this has to do with eating out and eating rich foods. So one other thing to take note of is when we eat out, just be mindful of what you're eating and how often you eat out, because we lose a little bit of control over what we're putting in our bodies. And the food there, even if it's at a nice place like Sweet Greens that's healthy fundamentally, probably isn't it's not the same as the food that we would bring home and prepare at home. And he was kind of a shocking example of that.
I have a question.
Sure.
What is an example?
Sure.
Well, you write it down there, and I think, okay, so which fats are healthy?
Avocado is a great example of a healthy fat. Walnuts are a great example of a healthy fat. Omega-3 fats that you get in things like a lot of fish, so in salmon, for example, or flaxseed, those are healthy fats. Almonds have healthy fats in them. So almond butter, for example. So those are a few examples of healthy fats. Okay? Any other question before I move on this? Yeah.
When you said your son's triglyceride.
So he went to see his doctor. He's going to try and change it through diet first because he's a young kid who moved to New York with a bunch of friends, and he's having a ball. And he's eating like he's having a ball. And like I say, he almost never cooks dinner except on the weekends because he works late, and they're bringing food in, and the company he's with gets them very good food, just not good for him food. And it really didn't strike him until he got his numbers. So he's going to try to change it through diet and exercise. And he exercises, he's fit. And he's going back to the doctor in 90 days. And if that won't do it, they're going to put him on a statin. But he'd like to try and do it with himself without taking any medication, if possible.
In the food, is it?
Yeah, it's in the. I think he's probably been eating food because he's been eating out a lot, like almost every meal. Probably 80% of his meals he's eating out, and yeah, it's probably just hasn't been healthy, but I'm sure it's been delicious. Yeah, absolutely.
Please, what about answer the staff? And I expect a lot of people in this room. So you didn't mention that it's only food. There's also drugs that do that.
Yeah, yeah, and so that would go back to where we talked about a little bit earlier about speaking with your healthcare professional about your numbers, and in this case cholesterol numbers, okay, and working with your healthcare professional to help bring them in line with where they should be. This is really talking about how we can incorporate healthy habits into our lives to reduce risk. But for things like if you've got highly elevated cholesterol, speak to your doctor, and they may well put you on statins. Okay, yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. I'm sure my son has his fair share of alcohol as a 23-year-old in New York City living with a bunch of friends. Yes. So that's actually a great point. I will make that point to him. Thank you. And that also kind of brings up a point. We don't really cover it in here. The MIND diet, says people can have essentially 1 glass of wine a day. There are conflicting views on alcohol and brain health. Fundamentally, alcohol is toxic, but it helps people relax. So there are some people who say it's okay, some who say it's okay in moderation, but certainly not binging and not drinking copious amounts. And there are others who essentially say, yeah, you can do that, but so that's really kind of a gray area. Okay. So in terms of how, what we can do, so we can think about how can I cook differently to make meals healthier? Are there foods that I can swap in and new foods I'm willing to try? Because at the end of the day, let's face it, changing our eating habits is a really hard thing to do. Eating habits, they both satisfy us physically, and there's cultural things we think about. There's, habits we think about, and kind of, we're sitting down at the table and having a glass of wine, and, it's kind of, it's almost ritualistic. So in terms of healthy eating, a couple things we can think about are using, olive oil or other healthy oils that have healthier fats in them, rather than butter, for example. From a hypertension standpoint, using sodium-free spices or herbs, cooking with herbs rather than salt, or limiting the amount of salt we get in our foods. And the biggest thing is if we can focus more on what we can bring into a meal rather than taking things away. So can we add more vegetables, for example, to make our food healthier? Do we want to add nuts or lentils and beans in, because the lentils and beans have a lot of fiber in, they've got a lot of protein, they're great for our hearts, they're great for our guts, they're fabulous. So think about things that we can add in. And fundamentally, like I said before, when we visualize that plate, we want to build the meals around vegetables, around beans, and whole grains, things of that nature. And for our meats, we want to choose leaner cuts of meats that are particularly lower in saturated fats. Okay? Just a quick note here about vitamins and supplements. There's lots and lots of money being spent on advertising supplements on TV late at night that's probably targeted at us. And a lot of these supplements really lack data behind them. There's no data showing any efficacy. Just a note of caution about supplements that are advertised and make wild claims that aren't FDA approved, that have very little regulation behind them, and that make crazy claims. and cost a bunch of money. Because there are a lot of people trying to make money on people being concerned about brain health. Okay? All right. Next question. Everybody ready? I want to see everyone's hands for one of these two. Challenging your brain may help lower your risk of cognitive decline. True? All right. Any falses out there? All right, absolutely. Absolutely. This is true. Continuing to challenge our brains as we age may lower the risk of cognitive decline. This is a really, really fabulous area because, challenging our brain, so if we almost think about this like exercising, you go to the gym to exercise and work out, challenging our brain is exercise for the brain, and it's a way that it's going to help build these neural connections and has both short-term and long-term benefits. So, cognitive or mental engagement really means keeping our mind active, where we have to think, where we're doing things that are difficult for us, where we're doing things that we have to learn, how to learn something new. That's what we really refer to as cognitive or mental engagement. And it can be, either learning a new skill or engaging in ongoing learning. And that ongoing learning can be online or it can be in person, which I'm going to share with you because we have an awesome opportunity for learning here in Wellesley. So what does the science tell us? So the science tells us that keeping our mind active, or this cognitive engagement, it forms new connections between the brain cells. It also encourages blood flow to the brain. So remember, we want to keep that blood going up to the brain to feed the brain. So when we enter into mentally stimulating activities like this, it can maintain or really even improve cognition at virtually any age. And this last bullet here, engaging in formal education, is a really, really great thing to do. And that's something that can help provide additional protection and resilience against dementia. So in terms of challenging ourselves, are there any hobbies that we want to learn? Anything new that we want to try and do? Are there, what activities sound fun? Would we really enjoy doing that we want to engage in? Or are there topics that we'd like to learn more about? And so some ways that we can incorporate this into our lives are, number one, take a class. And this is where Wellesley, one of the many areas Wellesley is awesome. If you live in Wellesley and you're 60 years old, you can audit classes at Wellesley College for Zippo, for free. Really? Yes. There's an administrative fee of about $200, but you can audit classes at Wellesley College. So registration for January opens in December. Anyone who's interested, I would strongly encourage you. I just found out about this in August, and I missed registration, but I'm going to call them in December. And it's open to men and women. So it really is a fabulous opportunity. You can drive right down the street here and audit great classes. There are other programs in the area too. There's a program called OLLI. I know that's at UMass Boston, and I think it may also incorporate BU and some other colleges where you can take courses for, I think, $75. You can audit courses. So there are a lot of educational opportunities. If you want to do it online, there are things like Khan Academy. They're not formal courses, but they teach you topics. So Khan Academy is a great one. It's free. There's also these massive online learning. I think they're all MOOCs, massive online something education. Harvard is in it. MIT is in it. And they offer online courses. I think you can either pay for or take them for free and not get a certificate. So there's an abundance of learning opportunities, should you like to engage in formal learning. Really an abundance, it's fabulous. And then there's trying new things like, learning an instrument, new cooking techniques, a new hobby, trying woodworking. But learning something where we're learning and engaging, again, we're creating new neural pathways. Those branches, those branches in our brains, they wither over time when they're not used. And when we learn new things, we grow new ones, and they create this resilience. Would anyone here like to share anything interesting that you're doing? New habits, learning something, or new hobbies, learning something new?
I saw a thing this morning on Brett Favre.
Yeah, I did.
He was the quarterback for Green Bay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And hits, he calls them concussions. I don't think they're all concussions. They say they have 1,000 hits that were close to or two of the things they said for cognitive improvement, bananas
Uh-huh.
and walnuts.
Yep.
Those two. And then they talked about dopamine, the transport system,
Mm-hmm.
was hampered by his being hit. Now, I always thought concussion, loss of consciousness.
Uh-huh.
They didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
I don't know how much credence to lend to what he was saying.
Yeah. So I haven't heard bananas. I have heard.
He
What?
is really something. He's a tough, solid guy.
Oh yeah.
Boy, he got mauled.
Oh yeah. 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 I think he has Parkinson's now. Yeah. Yeah.
I have some friends who
I think investing, if you're learning, we'll probably do that. And if they're doing it with others, there's a social component to it. So I think investing is a good one. Yeah.
One of my favorite things is two different podcasts. One of them is a whole series put out by the BBC
Mm-hmm.
called In Our Time.
Uh-huh.
They have them on several different topics, science, history, and so forth. The other thing I love to do, and this is just a great pairing with just repetitive exercise at the gym or something, is a podcast called Learn French by Podcast. And it's great. They're graduated according to, intermediate, beginner, or whatever, but they're free online.
Yeah. And so those are right. Particularly learning a language is one of those things that's absolutely good for us cognitively. What I would encourage you to think about, we want to make sure that we're actually learning something and that it's hard. We need to work on it. So when you're probably a little tired at the end because you're getting a lot of blood flow to your brain. All right? So things that are hard should, and again, probably make us a little tired. Did you have a question? Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? So I joined the Boston Mycology Club. I love cooking, and so I'm going to learn about mushrooms. You'll see me wandering the woods here in Wellesley with a big bag, hopefully filled with mushrooms. And I'm going to learn which ones are safe and learn to cook with them. I'm going to be very careful. Right now, I only have one that I'll identify and eat. But the people in the Boston Mycology Club can identify like over 1,000 of them. They're very good. So that's something that I've incorporated in. All right, and the last area we're going to talk about is staying connected. And this is, staying socially connected, avoiding isolation. Okay, so there's research that's showing really that connecting with others, can help support brain health and overall health. Has anyone here seen that show, The Blue Zones? It's a show on Netflix. And they looked at a bunch of areas throughout the world that had a very high proportion of centenarians as a percentage of their population. So people were living healthily to a much older age in these areas. And one of the commonalities they had were these social connections. They would get together, there was, I think, one in Sardinia, Italy. They'd all get together in communities and eat together and have a cup of coffee and talk all the time. They do things probably like you do it down here at the community center. So staying active can, support brain health. And social engagement is also, associated with living longer, with living healthier, whereas being isolated, is associated with poorer outcomes. And it can be harder to make and maintain better choices when we're isolated. So in terms of staying connected, again, we're going to want to think about what are things that I like to do? How do I like to stay connected with others? And how can I get involved in our community? Are there any clubs or groups I'd like to join? And I would imagine that this senior center has a lot of fabulous activities. The fact that you're all here this afternoon is very encouraging, actually. So, a couple things that we can do, tips for staying connected. We can volunteer for a cause that's important to us. Like this. This is great. This is what I'm doing. I've been doing this 6 months. And, but it's a way that I can stay connected in the community. Schedule regular phone calls or video chats with people who we're important to. My fabulous wife, once again, we have 2 sons. Our 23-year-old Sage, who apparently drinks too much in New York, and we have a 27-year-old in San Diego. So we're split up all over the place. So what did my fabulous wife do? She scheduled what she calls the Derrickson Dish. Our last name is Derrickson. On Sunday at 7 o'clock, we're together on a video call, the 4 of us. And so it's there, it's on the calendar, and it happens every Sunday at 7. It's awesome, and it's great to connect with the boys, and they love it. Visiting friends and family, participating in community events. So things like, events down here at the center, are fabulous ways to stay engaged. But the important thing that we want to do is we want to keep engaged and we want to prevent isolation. Because as we get older, it is possible to get isolated, and we want to be cognizant of it and avoid it. And if we know someone that we care about and they are isolated, maybe we can help them. Okay. So, in summary, the things that we talked about today, are really things that we can incorporate into our everyday lives to live healthier overall lives. And when we do things like this, it's going to be healthy, not just for our body, but for our brains as well. And what we want to do is, again, build this resilience, cognitive resilience, so that we can, so that when we end up getting cognitive decline, we're starting from a much higher baseline, and we have protection against it. So it either delays it or can prevent things like Alzheimer's or other dementias altogether. So we want to focus on getting that quality sleep. We want to think about, if we smoke, being smoke-free. And again, if you don't smoke but know someone who does, please let them know that this is a risk for brain health as well. We want to, yeah. So it's not that the room temperature should be a certain temperature, but it's that some people prefer a warm room. Some people prefer a cool room. So my wife, for example, likes the room cool. So we have our window open in the fall right now, and our room is probably 56 degrees at night. I prefer it a little warmer, so I wear maybe a sweatshirt and warmer clothes to bed and some socks. But we get there. But what's important is that we want to understand what temperature helps us sleep best and create an environment where we have that temperature. And whether that's things like temperature or light, do you like it light or dark, or noises, whatever that environment is that helps us sleep well, let's be cognizant of it and try and incorporate it, try and create that environment so we get a good night's sleep. Yeah.
What is your opinion on sleep aids?
On sleep aids, I don't have an opinion on sleep aids and pills. That would be something I would encourage you to speak to your healthcare professional about, speak to a doctor about.
If someone has Alzheimer's or some other version of dementia, I remember hearing years ago that you couldn't by Alzheimer's until.
Yeah.
Can you tell the difference now?
So.
Different forms of dementia.
Yeah, so the Alzheimer's Association actually has a specific presentation on this called the 10 signs? Yeah, called the 10 signs for determining Alzheimer's. And so it's a big answer to that that's probably not going to happen in 2 minutes. However, I would check with the Alzheimer's, couple things. I'm going to give you their website and some information. If you have an immediate concern, I'll give you someone you can talk to about that. But I would also encourage you then to attend that session. And it's an hour-long session on things you look for.
Just had not a direct family member, but a sort of in-law.
Yeah.
Who's been diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And we just wonder, what is it that makes someone say he has Alzheimer's and someone else has some other form?
Yeah.
Or do they say everyone has Alzheimer's now because that's what people recognize, the main people recognize?
Yeah. So the quick answer to that is, a neurologist likely performed tests and looked at them physically. So, for example, my mother-in-law has dementia. She has vascular dementia. All right. So she has congestive heart failure, and the congestive heart failure, because of that, isn't able to pump the blood and feed the brain like it should. So that's a type called vascular dementia. It's not. It has different. Alzheimer's. The hallmarks of Alzheimer's are this amyloid plaque and tangles. These tau tangles. So she doesn't have that, but she exhibits signs of dementia. In terms of how they go about, you can speak to a neurologist can help with that. Yeah, you're welcome.
NCI also apply to
Does MCI also apply to?
you know what NCI
Yeah, mild cognitive impairment. Yeah.
does those conditions you described for us to follow also should be followed for NCI?
What we've talked about here today, these here today should be followed by everyone, healthy or not. This is really about building brain strength and helping, if you have MCI, for example, slow its progression, or if you don't have MCI or any other type of dementia, to reduce your risk of getting it in the first place or delay onset of it. So this is designed for everybody. Now, if someone has MCI, they likely should be speaking to a neurologist about that as well. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so, I'm sorry, I didn't answer part B of your question, which is how can they test for it? Years ago, what you said was true. It could only actually be diagnosed post-mortem. Now there are actually a number of ways to do it. There's the PET scan that you talked about. I believe there's a spinal tap as well that they can do it with. And there's a number of new tests that are coming out on the market, including one that's an eye scan. There's a lot being done in this area of diagnosis for it. And
I thought there must be, but I
yeah.
don't know what it was.
Yeah, there is, some of which is commercially available and some of which isn't yet, but will be shortly. And the good news on that front is that, for many, many years, there was virtually no progress on the Alzheimer's front in terms of treatment. Zero. And when I say years, 25 years, like strikeout after strikeout after strikeout. We've recently had a couple of successes, and success especially in things like pharmaceuticals builds on success. We build on the success of one intervention for the next, and so on and so on and so on, which is all good news. And this is also driving a lot of diagnostic work right now. So yeah. MCI is called, that's okay, mild cognitive impairment. Yeah, MCI, mild cognitive impairment. All right, I got slightly off track here, but again, the 7 areas that we covered here, smoke-free, taking care of our mental health, moving, again, the number one thing we can do, if we're gonna do one thing at all, it's getting moving and taking care of ourselves physically, okay? That's number one without question. Eating healthy, being cognitively engaged, challenging ourselves, and staying connected at events like this. I had mentioned this earlier. The Alzheimer's Association is an unbelievably fabulous organization. They're incredible, okay? They have a 24/365 helpline, okay? you call them Christmas at 3:30 in the morning, and you're going to get a live clinician on the phone. Okay? So 800-272-3900. And so if you have any questions about your in-law, for example, I would keep that number, call them, and you'll get a clinician on the line who can answer your questions, who can answer clinical questions much better than I can. They also have a lot of great resources online, alz.org. And they've partnered with, Alzheimer's Association has partnered with AARP and put together something called Community Resource Finder. So that's at communityresourcefinder.org. And I'm going to leave this up here so anyone can take a picture of it or write it down afterwards. But what this is you can type in any service that you're looking for, type in your zip code, and it'll tell you all of the providers in this local area here who can help you out. So, they are, and this is all free. So, they're a fabulous organization. I'm going to be participating in the Alzheimer's Walk because it's important to me. And I would encourage you, if you have any interest and want to come on down, and if you have any interest in raising any funds and contributing, please do so, because they provide a wonderful, wonderful service to many, many people who really need it. And they do it all for free to the user. Okay? Any other questions before we wrap up? All right, thank you all. I appreciate your time.